Welcome everyone to my second installment of videos on the game called Black Swan by Novo Games. In the first video I covered the supply rules, and today we're going to have a look at the production phase. Here you can see the play aid, and I've covered 1.2. 1.1 is actually pretty straightforward, I believe, if you read the rule book. So now I'm going to have a look at 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, and 1.6 and 7, and well, that's actually basically it. So first you collect PPs, production points, and those are equal to the economic track, which can be found on the side of the board. It's this one here, and there you can actually see how many points, how many production points you have to spend. I've actually printed out this overview from Board Game Geek, which helps me track them more easily. You can see here that the Russians, they have 75, but they're actually down to 70 because they lost a production area. Over here, this one in Ukraine, which now shows a black pillar denoting that it belongs to Germany now. So they've lost that one. That one is worth 5 production points. So the Russians have gone from 75 to 70. Well, I can actually explain to you how you calculate production. You basically add those production areas to the strategic areas. Strategic areas, for instance, would be Moscow. It's actually the ones that I've shown here with flags. It's not just Moscow, it's all the other ones with flags as well. Those are worth 5 PPs each. The small cones, or pillars, or whatever you want to call them, are worth 5 production points. You have slightly larger ones, like the black one you see here in the Ruhr area called Essen. That one is worth 10, and you have even bigger ones. These, for instance, this one, which is worth 20, as you can see, and the US also has one of those. So you add all of those up, and then later you can actually start spending them. What you do have to be aware of is there are certain areas on the map indicated by means of a clenched fist, and those need to be garrisoned, which means that either a land unit or an air unit needs to be present in them in order to actually qualify. Well, obviously I believe you don't even get the production points associated to it if they also happen to be in a production or strategic area, at least if it's a territory that you've conquered. In this case, it's a home territory, so I'm pretty sure they would get it anyway. But no, they wouldn't. Well, they might actually get that. I don't know. We'd have to look it up. But anyway, what happens is you lose for each such area. Let me pick this one. For instance, Mosul for the British, as well as Abadan. I've actually indicated that by means of a die. For each such an area that you control but which is not garrisoned, you lose 1 production point. So the British actually have 35 production points at the moment, but because of actually not having garrisoned those 2 areas, they lose 2, which brings it down to 33. Now, why is it on 31? Because the next phase is actually about naval warfare, and in it the Axis gets to attack the Allies, in this case because it's the Allied turn, and the 1 die indicates that in this particular case the Allies lost 1 PP here as well, and the same thing happened in the Southern Atlantic, so in total they lost 2 production points there as well. So 35 minus 4 brings the British total down to 31 production points they can actually spend in this phase. Now, I've actually shown, I've indicated it by means of dice, what I've done, what I've bought. These 2 are 2 new units for the British. Each new unit brought onto the board costs 2 production points, and naval units have an additional restriction that you cannot build any more points in the same turn. The same applies to fortresses, by the way. Well, other than that, I've reinforced a number of naval units. This one costs 2 to reinforce. So do these, but for instance this one, which is an aircraft carrier, each step costs 4 production points to reinforce, so that one is much more expensive. And again, as is the case for all other naval units, you cannot build more than 1 production point per season per unit. Here you can see the other things I've done. This one is an air unit, which also costs 4 production points per step. This one is an infantry, which costs 1. So basically that's what I've done. Well, you can reinforce naval units in contested areas as well, as long as all the areas in between are actually friendly controlled or also contested. Note that if you're playing the 1939 or 1941 campaign games, all intervening sea areas need to be friendly controlled. Otherwise you're not allowed to reinforce any naval unit. The same goes for a land or air unit as well, which needs to trace supply or partially needs to trace supply by sea. So the exact same thing. So there is an important difference there between playing a scenario or playing a full campaign game. Now, where can you actually put new units? Naval units can be put, in this case I'll show the British as an example. Here you can see, well, it's a battleship, but it's a naval icon, and you can place new units up to the stacking limit, but I believe it's 1 per sea zone that you can place, so you would be able to place 3, so 1 here, and 1 here in the North Atlantic, always up to the stacking limit. And these are actually the new units I bought for the Soviets. I also bought a Blitz disc, which costs 20 points, so that's a huge investment, but the situation on the map is such that it's really worth it for the Russians. Now, I've also built 2 fortresses which had previously been eliminated. There's a special rule for the Russians, building a new unit for them. The first step actually costs 1 production point only, not 2, which it costs for all other nations. But a fortress, just like any naval unit, can only be reinforced by 1 step each turn. So it is relatively cheap for the Russians, but you cannot build up a fortress enormously within a very short amount of time. This is a newly built artillery unit. The 1 is the amount it costs to actually build it, so 1 for the Soviets, and then the 3 other ones is each additional step costs them 3 pp, and they don't have any such restriction of only being allowed to build a single step. Same is true for the infantry unit you can see below. First step, and then built up to its maximum strength by each time adding another 1 production point in. Yeah, that's actually how it works, and you can place them, newly built land units, in any controlled area that's in supply and that is not fully stacked. For instance, over here, even though it's in supply, I cannot put any new units because the 4 ground units is the maximum units of a single side that are allowed to be within a territory. But I could place here 1 in Kiev, for instance, or this one is completely empty. I could put 4 new units there. So yeah, that's how reinforcements work in production, and reinforcements work in Black Swan.